Robert Tellis has been found guilty, and the prosecutors talked to Court TV. So we're going to go ahead and watch it together and see what the attorneys have to say.
Brilliant job. And he didn't look like an easy client. Let's bring them in now. Let's welcome in attorneys Robert Draskevich and Michael Horvath. Good morning to you, gentlemen. And I really mean it. I just want to start by saying so many of our viewers noticed you two and your advocacy with those very bad facts that you had to contend with. And so I just want to start by commending you on the trying of the case and the great lawyering that you did. You created a lot of doubt that was evident in those jury deliberations. So let's start there. Robert Draskevich, you closed, your close was sensational. In pointing to the hair and the profile and all of that, it seemed that you got the jury hung up on that for days. Your reaction?
Thank you so much, Julie. Michael and I worked real hard to present Robert's case the best we could under the circumstances. Obviously, our job is to create doubt. I mean, you know, these trials shouldn't be like a speeding train getting to their destination of a conviction. So we worked as hard as we could with the facts that we had to present the strongest defense possible.
It was evident that you did, and he didn't make it easy. You know, him testifying, I know that you can't divulge, you know, the client communications with him, but everybody watching it, analyzing it, was saying surely this was against the better advice of counsel. But he did, and it seemed that he undid a lot of the great work that you both did. Michael, let me go to you on this, please. My understanding is that you both were retained, I mean, like at the 11th hour, right before this trial even started. Is that right?
That's correct. Originally, the trial was set earlier this year, and Robert was retained on the case, and we were going to come in and just try the case when it was set, and due to the issues with the Review Journal and the privilege of Mr. Gearman's sources and devices, that's why it was continued so much. So then we were on this for several months leading up to this court date.
Well, and for not having a lot of time to prepare, there was a lot to go through, a lot of evidence this jury had to consider. And it seemed, based on their questions, that what they were hung up on was that video. And Robert, which you pointed out, I want to go back to a clip from your close where you're pointing out the suspect having hair.
You have this evidence. It wasn't part of his presentation, but it's been provided to you. Look at the profile. What's that look like on the top of the head? I'd submit to you that looks like hair. We've seen Mr. Tellis. He gave testimony from the witness stand. Does that profile match the profile in that vehicle? I mean, it's no secret. The man's bald.
Okay, Robert, take us kind of inside. When did you notice this? When did you kind of devise the plan to go after this in close?
You know, we were aware of this days before closing, but we thought the most effective point to bring it forth would be at closing. That way the state could not rebut it. You know, every time we come into these cases, and most of the cases we try are sexual assault cases, racketeering cases, murder cases, we bring a team approach. It was myself, Michael Horvath, and Josh Berry of Manifest Trials. We try these cases together, and oftentimes we try and out-analyze the state or the federal government. We try and out-investigate each and every case. This was one of those grenades that we wanted to just drop at the end to try and stop their proceeding forward with getting a conviction. So we knew about this several days before closing, but we thought the best time to present it would be at the very end.
Oh, that was so smart, so smart. I have another clip here. Let's take a look at where you're talking about how there was no blood found in Robert Tellis's vehicle.
There was no blood or DNA evidence concerning Mr. Gearman in Mr. Tellis's home, in or on his vehicles, in or on his clothing. None of that would implicate Mr. Tellis. There was not a positive identification of the subject vehicle or Mr. Tellis at the scene.
Another very favorable fact for your defense team. And right before Robert Tellis testified, and Michael, I'll go to you on this. You all had done such a great job creating what do I want to say? Not creating, rather substantiating the alibi with the cell phone expert talking about where he was and not being there at the scene. And you couple that with what we just saw, no blood in the car. Michael, after you all did such great work there, I can't imagine what it was like sitting there with then Robert Tellis getting up there and undoing it all and having the testimony come in on cross, the message from his wife, the "Where are you?" text. What was that like? What's that like as an attorney when you really have a client kind of undermining your work right there in front of the jury?
Well, myself and Mr. Draskevich, when we were talking with our client, obviously in every case you advise your client of the pros and cons, the pitfalls of if someone testifies, if a defendant testifies. And Mr. Tellis was well aware that if he testified that there could be good things and bad things, and he ultimately made that decision. And it's the client's decision to do that. And as defense, as we go in and we do these things, and Robert did a great job on this case on lead, we have to deal with what we're given and what the client's wishes are.
No, certainly. How is your client doing this morning? Clearly, he didn't take the news well yesterday. How is he today, Michael?
Well, we spoke to him briefly yesterday. We anticipate going to see him at some point today to discuss potentially the next steps, what he would like to do, what our involvement would be. So we can have an update on that maybe later. But at this point, we didn't get a chance to talk about him or talk with him at length.
Sure. And again, certainly want to acknowledge, I know that there are privileged communications that you just can't share legally, ethically. When we saw him testify in narrative form, right away, we started in with analysis, and I said, it seems very apparent to me that these are two very ethical lawyers who do not want to violate any ethical rules, and they're going to have him testify in such manner. Is there anything at all you can share with us, or anything else you would like the public to know about that without violating any privilege? Anything more you can share, Robert, about that situation?
And our channel has talked about this a little bit, but if Robert Tellis was getting on the stand and he was going to be lying, the lawyer had only limited options to make sure that he himself was protected, because if he knew that Robert was going up there to lie and fighting and saying that that is true and advocating for him, then he could actually lose his license and not be able to practice again. So the fact that they did a narrative where he got to tell his own story when he was on the stand was one way for the lawyer to protect himself, because this was Robert's story and only his story. And that is what he said the day that Robert was getting on the stand. He said it to the judge and the jury.
Well, obviously, it's every defendant's right to testify or not to testify. And I'm really glad, Julie, that you pointed out, obviously, the communications we had with Robert Tellis are privileged. We honor his right to testify, his right to present his case. I mean, generally, defendants don't want to face juries and tell their story, but Robert Tellis is an articulate, educated man. It's always his choice. Ultimately, it was his choice to present his side or his version of the facts, and that's what he did. I'm not really going to comment on why it was in narrative form, but nonetheless,
that's why it was in narrative form. That is why he's not saying anything, because he can't, because that would be violating some client privilege and really letting the public see. But it should be pretty obvious to anyone who paid attention to the trial and what the lawyer had said that he had to do it that way because he knew that Tellis was lying about certain things and he could not lie with him.
He was able to get his points across to this jury.
Mm-hmm. Right, as is his right, as you noted. Is there anything else that you would like the public to know about this case? Anything that maybe didn't come into evidence or couldn't come in that you would like to share with us about Robert or Michael, either of you, please?
You know, Robert's going to continue to fight this case. He has a great deal of resolve. That's one of the great things about our American justice system, is that those that are accused with serious crimes or all crimes have a right to fight their case. We have this due process, right to confrontation, right to present evidence, and file motions to exclude the state's evidence. This is a very important step in the justice system. However, I anticipate there will be many steps that will follow this one.
Sure. Will you be staying on his case as he seeks post-conviction relief or perhaps an appeal?
You know, that's a very good question. That's something we're obviously going to have to discuss with him. We try cases. That's kind of what our firm, our law group, is focused on.
Sure.
He obviously has a right to appeal. We anticipate him pursuing an appeal. That's one of those things that are yet to be determined.
I'm gonna bet that they do not proceed with him, and that will be because Robert doesn't want them. Robert had gone through, I think it was up to 8 lawyers, kind of like Sarah Boone. He went through a lot of lawyers and even represented himself at one point. And now that he lost in his head, I could see him saying that they're not good enough to help him or do what he needs, so he'll just take back over from here.
Right. Well, it is very evident that you two do trial work, and if he needs to get someone who does primarily appellate work to handle that, we would understand. Your trial skills were tremendous, both of you. We would love to have you two come back on someday after you've gotten some rest and give us some analysis on another case that is not yours. How's that sound?
Thank you so much, and we appreciate being on your show.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Robert Draskevich, Michael Horvath, thank you both so much. Take good care.
So yeah, pretty good information. And I didn't realize that they were hired on like at the last minute, which means they really did do a good job of defending him. I thought that they knew the case pretty well when they spoke in trial. So they did a good job. And they also did a good job of not lying themselves and putting them at harm's way for losing their license or anything.